Hey there, art nerds. So I have been playing around with acrylic markers a lot this year, and I'm always looking for markers that can bring different properties to the table that offer different uses. So today I'm talking about the Artistro acrylic dual tip markers. This is the 60 color set, sorry. And then I was looking for something that had a very fine nib for smaller details or to use on paper. So these are the Coogert, however you want to say it, 36 colors, extra fine tip. So both of these are acrylic markers. I purchased both of these on Amazon. I paid out of pocket for them. So all opinions are my own. I'm not exactly sure what all I want to test these out on today. I'm going to kind of start out on paper and see how they go from there. So to begin with, obviously we're going to unbox these, take a look at the features and talk about them, but I'm going to swatch them on Strathmore Smooth Bristol as well as a sheet of Kraft paper. And if you guys watched my metallic acrylic marker video, I made this bookmark using the metallic marker. So looking at how acrylic markers handle on different papers is definitely something I'm interested in. But acrylic markers are not just great on paper, they are great on fabric, they're great on plastics, they're great on porous surfaces like unglazed ceramics. I have done all kinds of fun projects with different acrylic paint markers over the years. I'll make sure to link some of those in the description below for you guys to get inspiration. Part of the reason I'm taking a look at these today is because I am doing an acrylic bookmark tutorial with the Art Lab, the St. Charles Parish Art Lab. So we're going to be painting on acrylic bookmarks, and I just want to see how these handle before I introduce them to my students. So I will probably be working on an acrylic bookmark with you guys at some point, whether it's with these markers or not. So if you're looking for more fun projects, keep an eye out for that. For almost anything that I do with Art Lab, I also create printables and templates that I share over on Patreon. So even if you just want to do a fun craft project and you're not very secure in your drawing skills, I've got you, friend. So hopefully that's something to kind of look forward to. I have had really good results with Artistro lately. They made the white acrylic markers that I use for my gingerbread card. So I'm going to start with the Artistro set. I've also had some really great results with the Artex acrylic markers. I bought a set that I never reviewed for you guys, I don't think, just because I liked it and I wanted to use it. And I really should do a video where I talk about that set because I do use it and like it a lot. So you know how it is. This year's been a mess. Been a mess for everybody. So this came from Amazon. I went ahead and opened it, and it is in a box. The box has all the colors on the back, and Artistro is a white label company. Their products are hit or miss. I have liked their acrylic markers so far. I really disliked their Gansai style watercolors. So this is one where even the reviews are not always very informative. So I would check video reviews and see how they handle and how other artists are feeling about them, and not just go by what artists say, because these companies will sometimes send product out to artists, but like how you feel when you watch them using those. Do the watercolors look gritty? Do they do weird things? Are you not satisfied with the granulation? Like, use your own discretion when watching reviews. That's why when I do reviews, I include so much footage, because my opinion might differ from yours. You might see a quality that is exactly what you're looking for that I hated. So by including that footage, hopefully you can make a decision. So we have a nice zippered case. It's actually really cute. And inside are our markers. This is a very nice layout for this. It kind of reminds me of the Color It markers I reviewed years ago. There is some information in here as well, which is kind of nice. Oh, and it's in English. Okay, cool. So we have some options with these. Paint pin instructions: painting and baking glass, ceramic, or porcelain. Make sure that the surface is thoroughly cleaned using a rubbing alcohol. Don't forget to remove any price stickers. Once you are happy with your design, let it air dry for 24 hours before baking. This will ensure proper adhesion of the design to the surface. After it is fully dry, place your project in an unheated oven. Make sure to use irons or ovens under adult supervision if you're under the age of 14. Now, they did not say they said unheated oven. They don't give a temperature or a time. So I may have to like look this up again and see how other people are doing this, because I'd love to go to Dollar Tree, pick up some inexpensive ceramics and play around with that. Hand wash in warm water. Remember to be extra careful with your handmade project. We do not recommend using a dishwasher or a heavy duty sponge. I would also recommend you don't eat off of anything that you've decorated with these, because I don't know the toxicity. These instructions will work in most cases, but every oven is different. Always do a test beforehand. There's no perfect method for any pen on the market. If you see that the paint washes off easily, adjust the temperature, but you never gave me a temperature. If the design melted, the paint might not have been dry enough, or may have been too humid in the oven, or the temperature might have been too high. They never gave me a temperature though. Painting rocks or other surfaces, make sure the paint is dry, and then you can apply a sealant. It can take anywhere from as little as an hour to as long as a couple days, depending on humidity. That is the truth. A hairdryer speeds up the process. Also, if you have a dehumidifier, that'll help speed it up too, but it can cause cracking if you painted the paint on too thickly. If the surface is rough, draw your design slowly to avoid ink splatters. The trick to avoid smearing is to put a very light coat first, let it dry, and then add more. If you use a spray sealant, make sure it is not too close to the object, because the spray, the solution, the solvent that they use in these can melt acrylic. So it can be really tricky to seal acrylic things. If it's too close, it will smear if you coat it lightly. Wash and dry your fabric prior to painting. After the paint is completely dry, heat set it for permanence. I'm assuming with an iron. Oh yeah, most fabrics can be heat set with an iron on medium or high heat without steam for 3 to 5 minutes. Use a piece of cotton cloth between the iron and the item. Hand wash the item in cold water 3 days after applying the paint. If you paint sneakers, wait until the paint is completely dry, then use spray sealant. That's cool. So my only complaint is they didn't give me heating instructions for painting on ceramic, but I love all those ideas. It's kind of different from how I've done. Like I painted a cotton bag using Artex SimTap markers a while back, and I didn't do anything to seal it. I didn't even heat seal it, and I've never washed it, to be fair, but I do carry it around with me all the time, and I've had no problems with it. So I think if you seal it or if you set it, that will make it even sturdier. Now, I will point out that paint markers are not the same as the inks that they use when they're doing screen printing on fabric. Those have to be heat set or they will never fully dry. So that's cool. I like the container that it came in the pouch. That's very cute, very travel friendly, more storage friendly than the box. And then let's look at our markers. So we have, these are very thin for acrylic markers. We have our brush tip. It is a fiber brush tip. And then we have a bullet point for finer areas. And they elastic in. And voila, they zip close. So let us take a look at the Coogert, however you want to say it, acrylic paint markers. So these are, I think, a PN tip, a plastic nib tip. So these would be for smoother surfaces because plastic nibs do have a tendency to sputter really bad. And so this would be maybe better for paper and for doing fine details. So these do not come with an organizer. I will just grab one green one. Oh, okay. These are basically the Arteza acrylic markers. And I said at the time that those were probably white labeled. These are extremely similar. So I'm very familiar with these. And the Arteza acrylic markers are not terrible. So these do shake. You hear the shaker. The Artistro ones do not shake and do not need priming. These are going to require priming. Ooh. So they have a plastic nib. So the nib itself may get clogged, but it's not going to fray or get torn up. So it says pigment ink, strong covering force, sunproof and waterproof. Shake several times, press the dip. Shake several times, press the tip down for a while, recap the pen tightly after used. suitable for children over 3 years old. I do not know a parent who would just give their child an acrylic marker and say, go forth. You don't need to be supervised with these. You can write all over the walls. I don't care. I mean, maybe on one specific wall. So knock, shake. So I guess knock is like that. Shake, push, write, and recap. So these are going to take me a while to prime. I will do one line for you guys, and I will do the rest, not even on camera, unless, you know, something weird happens. And I just need some scrap paper for this. Do these have a name, a color name written on them? No. That's not really a big deal when you have 36 colors. It's not like you've got that many to go with. All right, they said knock, shake, press the tip down for a while. So I'm watching, you guys can't super see, watching to see if the ink will flood. It's starting to move now, okay. So my usual technique is to pump a few times. Okay, and then write. Okay, so decently smooth. These are going to be smooth on papers. It would be interesting to try playing around with these in a coloring book, not necessarily to fill the whole area, but to do like highlights or details. Because if you work on a more textured surface, it is definitely going to sputter all over the place. So if you are a parent and you're buying these for your kids, you may want to go ahead and prime these for them. Or if you are like me and you have some hand health issues, you have some disabilities, you may either want to take your time with these, do a couple every night so you don't wear yourself out, or you may want to ask somebody else to help you get them started. Because, I mean, with 36, that's not too bad. But if we were pumping and priming a larger set, I know with the SimTap markers, it really started to hurt my hands. So my advice with these is get them started before you plan on working on a project. So getting these started wasn't too bad. They don't take a whole lot of pumping. It's not as bad as like the SimTap markers that I reviewed a while back. On smooth papers, you don't get a lot of sputtering, but if you catch the pen wrong, it can catch on the paper and sputter. So next, I want to start by swatching out on the Strathmore Bristol. So we are going to start with the, let me move these out of the way, but we're gonna start with both ends of the Artistro and then move on to these Coogert. And, you know, or Coogert, whatever, that's the name right there. As I mentioned before, these are a white label product, so that means somebody else manufactures these and sells them either blank or with minimal screening, and then another company can buy them in bulk and rescreen them. I'm pretty sure these are the same as the Artistro acrylic markers from past advent calendars. So this may be a shared manufacturer between the Alphabet Soup brand and Artistro. So while I was putting these markers up, I actually found this pamphlet in there. It is very Englishy. And apparently it comes in 3 widths, 0.7, 3 millimeters, and 6 millimeters. Unique acrylic marker can stimulate your creativity. Premium quality acrylic paint pens use rich, vibrant, water-based ink that dries quickly to produce a very durable, opaque, and glossy finish on light and dark surfaces. Multi-purpose, enjoy an elegant and friendly user design on creating art projects on a variety of surfaces like stone, metal, ceramic, wood, plastic, terracotta, polymer, clay, rubber, and more. Also, industrial use or marking tools. parts and other industrial applications. Safe for use, no odor. Ideal for artists and art students, teenagers, and adults. Characteristics, reversible tip. Tip, bullet and chisel. And then there's our certifications for use on glass, porcelain, metal, plastic, ceramic, wood, canvas, stone. And then there is a user manual, which, I mean, yeah. And they also suggest we store in a horizontal position to allow the ink to reach the tip. If the marker nib is not smooth or clogged, is not smooth or is clogged, okay. It is recommended to remove the nib and wash it with water. After cleaning the surface of the nib and the writing part, you can put the nib back and it can work as normal. So that is good info to have. So kind of strangely for me, I don't have show notes for these markers, but in a way that is fine because while using these markers, I encountered no major problems and nothing particularly of note that you should be aware of before purchasing. So we are swatching the Artistro markers first. They have a fiber brush tip and then a fiber bullet tip on the other end. I really like that combination for these markers. These markers do not involve any prep beforehand, so it's not like you have to unwrap each individually or you have to shake them or you have to prime them. So if you have hand health issues that make it difficult or tiring to prime markers like that, these might be a good alternative for that. This is the 60-piece set, which is currently unavailable on Amazon, but I believe the 40-piece set is still available. And honestly, with these white label companies, products come in and out of availability kind of as they can get a hold of them. So just because they're not available at the time of recording does not mean they're going to continue to be unavailable. I found them readily mixed. I didn't notice any separation of color. The bullet and the brush tip had very, very close hues, so there wasn't a lot of separation there. And the worst part of these is actually trying to get them into these tiny little slots. As you guys can see, the elastic bands are really very tight, but that's not really a major problem. It's just a little bit finicky, and you could always switch out the holder to something that you're a little bit more comfortable with. So with 60 colors, you do get a lot of options for skin tones and neutrals, as well as primary colors and fluorescents. I found it very easy to pick a highlight, a low light, and a mid-tone with these for some of the projects that I worked on. So I really liked the color selection as well and found it rather intuitive. It's not like I felt like I was really missing any colors or lacking for any colors. The opacity on these is decent. If you want full opacity, you may have to give them a couple passes, which is not unusual for acrylic markers like these. Marker bodies themselves are fairly narrow, which is more comfortable in the hand, but probably does not contain as much paint. So I would not recommend these markers in particular for larger projects, more porous projects, or projects that are on fabric. These work great on paper. The Coogert markers come in a pretty basic cardboard box. There's not even a divider. This is a 36 color set. These have a plastic nib, which can become clogged, but they're fairly easy to clean out with a rag or with a little bit of rubbing alcohol. They're fairly easy to activate, although they do need to be pumped and primed in advance, which might be hard on your hand. The entire body holds the paint, and these are similar to other acrylic pens that I've reviewed here in the past, so I know that these can last a really long time given the fact that the whole body holds the paint and that the tip is actually very small. With any plastic nibbed pens, I would recommend not using them on fabric, as the way the plastic nib works, it tends to catch and sputter on fabric, but these work really well on smooth surfaces. So I wanted to try these markers out on cardstock. This is a Kraft paper cardstock. It does have a more assertive, more fibrous texture than some other Kraft paper cardstocks that I've tried before. I really like the opacity and coverage of these markers. I think it's pretty decent considering you can't really control the ink flow. It's got a stationary ink flow. It's not like pumping it will make more paint come out. And considering there isn't really a lot of room in these for paint, I think they hold up pretty well with that in mind. So these could be a lot of fun on darker papers. They stand out quite well on darker cardstocks. You do get some good opacity, and it really makes some of the lighter and brighter colors seem to pop. So these could be really fun for decorating Christmas cards. Acrylic markers dry fairly fast because they're not putting down an excessive amount of ink. So I will test them out in a coloring book a little bit later on. And I do think that they are acceptable for use in coloring books. They don't wet the paper so much that it becomes really frail and starts to tear up. I've said this before, but I think acrylic markers are really fun, and I think they're a very approachable way to play around with the acrylic medium, especially if you're not very comfortable with like acrylic paints and acrylic brushes. These are a very beginner-friendly sort of medium that plays well in sketchbooks, especially like mixed media or watercolor sketchbooks. And you can definitely work back and forth with the colors to kind of build up things or to make corrections. In some of my other acrylic marker videos, I demonstrate these things, whether it's doing a piece in a sketchbook or doing illustrations on mugs and acrylic sign holders. I think acrylic markers are really fun and a great way to utilize or get into mixed media, but also to decorate non-standard, non-paper objects. Now, with the Coogert acrylic pens, these caught on the surface texture of this paper. So I don't really think these pens are a great fit on textured watercolor papers, on canvas that has a more assertive texture to it, or on rough and porous surfaces. But I already mentioned that a little bit earlier on in the video. I just really noticed those problems here on this Kraft paper cardstock. So one of the nice things about swatching is it always gives me ideas for how I want to use, in this case, these acrylic markers, what their limitations are going to be, and sometimes the colors themselves give me inspiration for what kind of subject matter I want to depict. So I mentioned earlier that I want to do some acrylic bookmarks with a class, and I think these, the Artistro markers, are going to be better suited to drawing on the very, very smooth acrylic than the plastic nibs. I think these are going to have a hard time depositing pigment, at least so the bookmarks are actually just like clear, smooth, glossy acrylic. Now, if I did like a spray fixative, these might work a little bit better, but then we're going to have sputtering issues. That said, these are really nice on smooth papers like this. And if this Kraft paper cardstock had a smoother texture, it would be really nice on colored papers like that as well. So they do have their purposes, and they're different purposes, even though they're using the same base material of acrylic paint. Now, while I definitely want to try doing acrylic bookmarks with these, I also want to try these out in a coloring book because I've never used acrylic markers in a coloring book. I have used them in sketchbooks, primarily Canson XL watercolor sketchbooks. In fact, my range of Christmas ornaments were originally done in a Canson XL watercolor sketchbook, but I haven't tried these on coloring book paper yet, so I am excited to play around with that as well. This is just a little snippet from my bookmark tutorial. I taught this as a class and I bought these markers for this class. So I wanted to kind of showcase them just a little bit. If you would like to learn how to make these bookmarks, please check that tutorial out. These worked perfectly for what I purchased them for. I found that I needed to do about 2 layers to get full opacity, but I was very happy with them. The acrylic bookmarks that I was working on are drying. I am clear coating them with some Krylon high gloss paint. So they will make a reappearance later on in the video when we're talking about what I think about these markers. And if you are interested in learning how to make them, if you're interested in a full tutorial, I'll have a video about that coming out as well. I'm working on that as a class for the St. Charles Parish Public Library's Art Lab. And I will have templates over on my Patreon if you would prefer to just color along rather than doing your own drawing. But like I said, keep an eye out for that. Today, we're really talking about these markers and how they handle. And I have been wanting to try acrylic markers in my coloring book. Curious little things. This is a KDP or like Create Space. You might be more familiar with that term. Printed book. It's available through Amazon and through my shop. And it features my charming Lilliputian characters. And I was thinking, I've done a lot of like alcohol markers in here. I have done some water-based markers in here, but I really want to see how acrylic markers might handle in a thin papered coloring book like this. And I'm honest about the quality of the paper because I didn't get much choice in the quality of the paper. And that is why I have a link at the front of the book where you can download all of these line arts and print them out on the paper of your choice. So that's why I can throw my own coloring book under the bus to a degree, because I know in the front of the book, I provide you with the real good stuff in case you want to print it out on like illustration board or watercolor paper, or if you want to do a transfer with them. So if you want to work with specialty papers and you want to work with my art, that is the way to do it. You can find the link where you can purchase your own copy of Curious Little Things. It is just $10, both on Amazon as well as through the Natto shop down in the description below. I think I'm going to work with this illustration today. I want to use both sets of the acrylic markers, and I have my handy color reference here, although it'll be less handy for the Coogert or Coogert or however you want to say it, whether you want to Frenchify it or not. I'm sure they don't expect anybody to be saying their name out loud. This is less useful for that because they just kind of like flop around in their box. But you know, with only 36 colors, I should be able to guess pretty accurately which colors are which. So I selected an illustration that I felt would be, one, easy to color with the markers that I have, fairly straightforward, wouldn't take a huge amount of time, and would also be able to utilize a lot of the colors that we have in this set, and also give me an opportunity to kind of layer colors. I'm doing something that's kind of a cross between a more painterly style and a cell shaded style, just because I am working on just regular, very thin paper, and it doesn't have a whole lot of body to it. So I wasn't sure how much I wanted to color back and forth. I didn't really attempt any blending techniques or wet into wet sort of techniques with these because this paper is, you know, it is what it is. If you've ever worked with a coloring book printed by Kindle, then you know what I'm talking about. It's not the sturdiest paper, and it really doesn't like water-based markers that much, but I was able to use these acrylic markers very comfortably, especially once I got a first layer down, and that first layer was able to dry. I definitely wanted to test out skin tones, and I will point out, especially with larger areas, you are going to get streakiness like you see here in the background with this like slate blue. If you go over it with another layer though, that really clears it up. These are a lot of fun, and they kind of remind me of like working with a gouache or an acrylic gouache because they have a matteness to them that lends itself really well for coloring in coloring books and also makes them not sticky. Now, one of the problems with these markers is they're using a white to kind of achieve that opacity. So you're not going to get like truly dark, rich colors. Everything is going to be a little bit more pastel or a little bit more muted, as you can see with the dark blue in the background. And that's just kind of a commonality with these inexpensive acrylic markers. They don't have quite the same qualities that higher end like Liquitex acrylic markers might have in terms of transparency. Everything is going to have kind of a similar opacity to it. I didn't really mind But one thing you want to notice is that with acrylic markers, they are going to start to obscure the line art in your coloring books. You might want that. You might use that to your own advantage, or you may decide that you need to re-ink your illustration. But I had no major problems using the brush side of these acrylic markers in this coloring book. I had no markers run dry. Even though you cannot like prime these to get more ink flow, I didn't notice any drying or any struggle with the ink to keep up with my hands or to keep up with ink flow. Like I said, we did get some streaking with covering a larger area early on, but a second layer really fixed that. And even after coloring in this coloring book, it's not like I noticed I had any dead markers or anything like that. So I was able to get more mileage out of these markers than I really kind of initially expected, and I'm pretty happy with that. I also haven't had any problems with this page sticking to the page before it after it dried, which can be an issue with acrylics. Acrylics that have a glossier coating can tend to stay tacky, whereas these matte kind of acrylics, they do dry a little bit more and they're not as prone to being sticky. So I selected an illustration. You guys might actually remember this because I did this as a watercolor field test a while back. I want to say it was like Lucas watercolors, but it might have been Rembrandt watercolors. And it's a chanterelle illustration, but I thought the colors would work really well for the colors that I have in this 60 color set. So that's why I went with this illustration, even though I have painted it in the past. So inexpensive white labeled acrylic markers like Artex acrylic markers or Artistro acrylic markers, they all tend to have the same sort of color qualities. They're all or almost all are going to have a fiber brush tip or a bullet nib or a plastic nib. They're all going to have similar inks with similar properties. There's not going to be a lot of variation in those aspects. So when it comes to buying acrylic markers like these, what you're really looking for are properties that appeal to you. Do you want a larger marker body that contains more ink, like the Artex SimTap markers that you can paint on fabric with because the ink flow can keep up with that? Are you looking for a very fine plastic nib so you can get in there and add highlights and do very fine details? Are you looking for something like these, which would work well in a coloring book that have both a bullet nib for finer details and a brush nib for covering large areas? Are you looking for specific colors? Different brands are going to have different color selection. That's really where most of the differences come about when it comes to acrylic markers. So the short answer is these work surprisingly well in this coloring book. Now, is this coloring book meant for wet media like acrylic markers? No. But these markers didn't tear up the paper. There was no abrasion. There was no pilling. There was no tearing through. And also, it didn't tear up the brushes on these markers. And they didn't even soak through. I did re-ink this just to get that line art back and to kind of keep things looking sharp. But I was really surprised and impressed by how much fun it was to use acrylic markers in a coloring book. I kind of thought these kind of inexpensive coloring books were really best suited to like alcohol markers, crayons, color pencils, maybe gel pens. But these work really well, and it definitely inspired me to maybe explore with acrylic markers a little bit more. So I don't know, keep an eye out for that in the future. And it wouldn't just be these Artistro ones. I think the Artex, let me go grab one. I'll show you what I mean. I think these Artex markers, which are like single-sided brush tips, would also work very well for a similar purpose. Something else I like about these is they are very comfortable in the hand. They're basically pen size, so I didn't really have any like hand fatigue or hand cramping. Very easy to cap and uncap. I mean, honestly, they're pretty great. There's not a lot of paint in these. I mean, look at them. They're probably a wick-based acrylic marker, and there's just not a lot of room for paint. So if you want to color large areas, the Artex SimTap markers, which actually are like a bottle of paint on the brush, might be a better option for you. But for coloring or for smaller projects, these could be great. So my acrylic bookmarks have dried, and I want to check in with those. So here's a peek at my acrylic bookmarks. I really like how they turned out. I think they look very cute. I purchased acrylic pre-cut blanks off of Amazon, but you could ask your local makerspace to cut some. I did my painting on the back of the bookmark, kind of using a cell shaded reverse painting technique that I explained in the tutorial, which is already live. And then I sealed the backs of these with Krylon spray gloss. I use the Artistro acrylic markers primarily, if not entirely, the brush tips, and I was very happy both with the color selection as well as how the brushes handled. They did not scrape up past layers of paint. They didn't disturb past layers. They were very easy to use on these acrylic bookmarks, and I had a lot of fun creating these. So these markers were purchased so that I could teach this class, so that I'd have the color selection and I'd also have the bullet nibs if I needed the bullet nibs. But I decided to do a review because I'd already paid for them and because I think acrylic markers are a lot of fun and I love playing around with them. And if you're interested in acrylic markers, I might as well use my knowledge and experience to help you guys find which ones are going to be the best fit for you. That said, I didn't really use the Coogert plastic nib ones, barely at all, and not at all for the bookmarks. These acrylic markers were a lot of fun to play with. I think my students are going to enjoy them too. At least I hope they're going to enjoy them too. They have worked well with what I have thrown them at, and to be fair to me, I have thrown acrylic markers at a lot of different like plastics and terracotta and even like a ceramic Christmas tree over the years, so I know what acrylic markers can do. These are just as capable as any of the Artex markers that I have reviewed if their capacity is smaller. You may also find them easier to use because not only do they have a bullet tip, which some people do prefer, and it can be good for fine details, but they also have a brush tip, which can be great for more nuanced pieces or for covering large areas quickly. I also had a lot of fun creating and painting these acrylic bookmarks that you see here. I think they turned out adorable. I'm really looking forward to teaching this class. I think my students will enjoy them. And I will be sharing the class on Patreon as well as the video to the public. So if you'd like to learn how to make your own, please like, subscribe, and keep an eye out for that. Unfortunately, I kind of feel like I didn't really have a good opportunity to test out the Coogert, however you want to say it, acrylic markers. However, these are very similar to Artisa's acrylic markers, which I have used in several videos, so I think I can speak to them. They are a pump action acrylic marker. There seems to be a fairly large ink capacity. They have a plastic fine point nib that I have found works best on not exactly smooth surfaces because there's just not enough friction for them to actually put down the ink. At least that's what I have found. But they work best with like a minimal tooth. So paper-like surfaces, these tend to work best on. So cardstock would be an excellent use for these. These are a great option if you want to work with opaque and vibrant color on darker colored papers. They are also good for fine details and fine lines. They are not going to work well on textured surfaces or fabrics because it's going to catch on that plastic nib and cause it to splutter or sputter. However, if you want that sort of like grit added to your work, and I can see reasons why you would want that, it adds like a nice texture and a little bit of realism, and in this time where sometimes it feels like everything is generative AI, that sort of human touch can honestly really mean a lot and can bring a lot of fun. Perfection is overrated. So you may choose to use these plastic nibs on those kind of surfaces for that kind of effect. I just think it's something that you should be aware of ahead of time. These use the same body as the Artisa acrylic markers. Hang on, I'll go grab one for you. So these are the Artisa markers. Let me grab my wipe again. Here we go. You can see, except you can post the cap, but otherwise you can see they are almost identical. I've had these Artisa markers for several years. They do get used from time to time, whether I'm signing art prints or I want to do some fine details with acrylics. They've lasted a long time. They have a shaker mechanism, so even if the paint separates, you can reactivate it. And I've never had any major issues with clogging with these. So, you know, they're not something I would use all the time, but they are something I do use from time to time, and they are handy for me and for what I'm using them for, which for the Arteza ones, since they were sent to me in an well, I bought the advent calendar, but they weren't something I picked out myself. I used them to sign art prints, and I'm quite happy with them for that. To the point where I thought it would be fun to get a wider range of colors and maybe use them on mini canvases or some other things. So hopefully I will have some inspiration and you guys will see that. I do wish I had thought of more projects where these would work well, but I know you guys have complained that my videos can be too long sometimes, so I am trying to work on that. The Artistro markers are fine. I find Artistro as a white labeling company to be hit or miss. I don't like their watercolors. I did like these acrylic markers. I also like Artex acrylic markers. I had purchased a set of like all white Artistro acrylic markers that came in various sizes, and I really liked those, and that's what kind of inspired me to give them another chance and to buy some more of their acrylic markers. So, you know, that's what kind of inspired that. In fact, I have a video where I show you guys how to make a very cute gingerbread house pop-up card, and that includes a mini review of those white markers. So if you're curious about those, make sure you check that video out. I like the case that these came in. I don't really have any real cons for these. They are good for acrylic markers. The case might be the biggest con because it is a little hard to put the markers back in. But, oh, and the markers do not have their color numbers or names on them. And they do actually have color names and numbers, but they are not screened on the marker. So this is basically useless as a reference tool. They didn't even have to give names to them because they're not even on the markers. You may choose to label the markers yourself, like compare your swatches to the back of the box and do that. That is up to you. I think that is something the company should have done themselves. But frankly, when it comes to these kind of white label products, you know, the body screening is usually pretty minimal because they have screened the company name on it as well as the tips and the sizes, and screening the color would have been an additional step, and that's additional money. So I kind of understand why they don't do that, but I am disappointed that they didn't. It also would have been nice if they had included a swatch page in this. Yes, I can make my own, and I probably will, but it would have been a nice inclusion. The case is pretty neat. It is a little hard to keep on my desk with the way it folds, but I do think it's interesting. And it's a well-built case that's actually quite attractive. And I do appreciate when companies include these sort of storage options with their products, because it makes it easier for me to bring these with me when I teach classes, and keep my markers organized and, you know, in the correct orientation, which would be horizontal. Whereas a box like this is much cheaper, sure, but it's harder to keep the markers in order. And I do actually care about those things. So I really enjoyed today's review. I really enjoyed what I shared with you guys. I think this is a really cute project. I can't wait to share it with my in-person students and with you guys and with my patrons over on Patreon. And I was really impressed by how well these actually handled in a coloring book. If you don't, oh, another thing is these are not particularly fumey. Like if you're sensitive to acrylic, to alcohol markers, these may not trigger you as much. I find some brands of acrylic, alcohol, I'm so sorry. I find some brands of alcohol markers really start to bother me. Some stink really bad and then some don't at all. These are, you can smell them for sure, but they're not overwhelming. So as always, when it comes to art supplies, I would recommend that you use these with parent or adult supervision if you're underage in a well-ventilated area. You know, just gotta protect those brain cells, right? So if you want to use these with alcohol markers, because alcohol tends to be a solvent to acrylics, I would recommend you do your alcohol markers first and then do your acrylic on top of that. But thank you guys so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed it. I hope this was helpful, useful, inspiring for you guys. I hope this was helpful in you guys making art a habit. I purchased these Artistro markers for myself, for a class that I'm teaching, and just for myself in general. So All opinions are my own, and hopefully this was helpful. If you enjoyed what I do and you want to help me continue to do it, you can financially support the work that I do by joining me over on Patreon at patreon.com/tomatosoup, ordering a copy of my coloring book or one of my other books from my shop. Or you can support my work for free by hitting like, leaving a comment, and sharing this video with somebody who you think will enjoy it. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon, maybe hopefully with our cute little bookmark tutorial. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye.